cheaper is always better, then why don't we replace the CEO first? That question sounds absurd, even offensive, but it forces us to confront a truth most people try to ignore. In the new economy of artificial intelligence, it may not be the weakest who fall first, but the most replaceable, and that could be anyone. For decades, technology has promised to help humans work smarter. But AI isn't just helping anymore, it's deciding who gets to work at all. What used to be a tool has quietly become a competitor, one that doesn't sleep, doesn't complain, and learns faster than we can. Meet Mila. She works at a call center in Manila. Her voice has comforted millions of customers from across the world, clear, warm, and patient. Until one day, her company introduced a new AI voice system that sounded just like her. It spoke perfect English, handled 10 calls at once, and never needed a break. Mila was told to pause her work while the company tested efficiency. But deep down, she knew what that meant. Meanwhile, in Ohio, Evan just graduated with a degree in computer science. He thought coding would be his ticket to a stable career, a field that would never run out of demand. Then he watched as new AI systems started writing software faster and cheaper than he could. His job interviews now included a strange question: how comfortable are you working with AI? But what they really meant was, how long until AI can do your job instead? AI is not a distant future. It's already restructuring the global economy, line by line, task by task. It's choosing which roles stay and which ones disappear. So maybe the real question isn't what can AI do? It's who will AI replace first and who gets to decide that? Because when machines can do almost everything cheaper, faster, and better, we're left with a deeper question: what's left for us to trade, if not our labor? And that's where the story begins. For most of modern history, the world's economic map was drawn along a simple line. Rich nations invented, poor nations produced. Globalization promised that everyone could win, as long as labor was cheap enough and borders stayed open. From the 1990s through the 2020s, that logic powered the rise of entire industries across the developing world. In Manila, in Dhaka, in Bangalore, millions of young workers built their lives around a single export: human effort. Western corporations outsourced what they could: phone calls, data entry, customer support, even software maintenance. And developing nations answered the call. The formula worked. A headset, a stable internet connection, and fluent English could lift a family into the middle class. For a generation, this human-powered globalization looked unstoppable. But history has a way of turning efficiency into obsolescence. Around 2020, a new kind of technology began to rewrite that equation: artificial intelligence, powered by large language models. What used to take teams of human workers could now be done by algorithms trained on billions of conversations, documents, and lines of code. The very foundation that made outsourcing profitable, the low cost of human labor, suddenly became irrelevant. In just 5 years, automation has swept through the service sector like a quiet storm. According to the International Monetary Fund, nearly 89% of business process outsourcing jobs in the Philippines are now at high risk of automation. That's not a distant forecast, it's an ongoing transition. The same corporations that once expanded across Asia for its cheap workforce are now scaling back, replacing people with digital systems that cost less, never tire, and can operate in every language. Accenture, AT&T, Google, these names once symbolized the promise of global opportunity. Today, they're the early adopters of a new reality. Teams once spread across call centers in Cebu or Chennai have been replaced by AI platforms that can handle customer queries with flawless precision and infinite patience. And for workers like Mila, this shift is personal. Her voice, calm, empathetic, and carefully trained, used to be the bridge between a frustrated customer in New York and a service team in Manila. But that bridge no longer needs her. A synthetic voice now speaks in the same rhythm, the same accent, even the same tone of reassurance she spent years perfecting. To the customer, nothing feels different. To Mila, everything has changed. This is more than the loss of a job. It's the collapse of a development model, one that defined the global South for 3 decades. The advantage that once came from cheap human labor has vanished, replaced by a new hierarchy built on data, capital, and computational power. Why then are developing countries hit first and hardest? The answer is cruelly simple. They use AI, but they don't own it. They contribute data, but they don't profit from it. They rent technology built elsewhere, hosted elsewhere, and controlled elsewhere. When automation becomes the new engine of efficiency, those without capital or infrastructure are left behind, just as they were before globalization promised to include them. In this emerging system, nations are no longer competing over labor costs. They're competing over algorithms, servers, and access to data. A country can no longer build its economy around people answering phones or processing information. Those tasks now belong to neural networks that never ask for health insurance or a pay raise. The result is a widening divide. Wealthy nations, armed with AI infrastructure and investment, are accelerating their growth, while developing nations are watching their most accessible industries vanish overnight. It's not that their people became less capable. It's that capability itself has been automated. Mila's story, then, is not just about one woman losing her job. It's a mirror reflecting the fate of millions in economies that once thrived by selling human attention. The work didn't move elsewhere this time. It simply ceased to need workers. The rise of AI marks the end of an era where labor was the foundation of value creation. For the first time, the world is facing a system that can produce, serve, and innovate without relying on people. A system that runs 24 hours a day, scaling without salaries or strikes. But this new efficiency raises a deeper question, one the global economy has never had to answer before. If nations no longer need workers to grow, what happens to those whose only asset was their work? And if labor no longer defines value, what or who does? For more than 2 centuries, capitalism was built on a simple exchange. Capital needed labor. Machines amplified human effort, but they still required people to operate, repair, and improve them. That balance between owners of capital and providers of labor created the modern economy as we know it. Artificial intelligence has quietly broken that contract. AI is not just another tool in the production line. It's a new form of capital, one that can function, scale, and even optimize itself without human involvement. For the first time in history, we have technology that doesn't simply assist labor, but replaces the need for it altogether. Economists often divide technology into 2 types of capital. The first is complementary capital, machines or systems that make humans more productive. Think of a doctor using AI to detect cancer earlier, or a financial analyst using algorithms to forecast market risks. In these cases, humans remain essential. AI simply amplifies their skill. But the second type is more disruptive, substitutive capital. This is when technology doesn't help humans, it replaces them. When a chatbot handles customer complaints better than a trained employee, when an AI assistant drafts contracts, or when code generators write software without a junior developer's input, capital stops depending on labor. And that's where we are today. ChatGPT can respond to thousands of customers simultaneously, without fatigue, without error, and without pay. GitHub Copilot can produce usable code in seconds, making entry-level programmers redundant before their careers even begin. Across industries, the logic is shifting from how do we make workers more efficient to how do we remove workers from the equation entirely. The consequences are massive. A 2024 Oxford study estimates that 47% of all existing jobs could be automated within the next decade. This isn't science fiction, it's already visible. Legal firms are using AI to review contracts. Banks are using AI to handle customer onboarding. Even creative agencies are experimenting with AI that generates entire campaigns. For centuries, labor was what gave humans bargaining power. You could sell your time, your strength, or your expertise. But when machines can perform the same tasks faster, cheaper, and without rest, labor loses its leverage. The system no longer needs people to keep running. In classical capitalism, capital and labor were partners in tension. Today, that tension is dissolving. AI allows capital to reproduce itself, to grow, learn, and compound value autonomously. In financial terms, it's a self-sustaining engine, capital that manages its own productivity. For workers like Evan, the young coder in Ohio, this shift feels personal. The tools he once relied on to boost his performance are now outperforming him. What began as assistance has turned into competition. His productivity has increased, but so has his replaceability. The irony is striking. The very technologies designed to empower knowledge workers are quietly training to replace them. The algorithm doesn't just execute orders, it observes, learns, and replicates. Every keystroke, every prompt, every correction feeds the system's evolution. AI doesn't just work with us, it learns how to work without us. This marks a fundamental transformation in capitalism's DNA. In the industrial age, machines multiplied human strength. In the digital age, AI multiplies human intelligence, then absorbs it. The result is a form of capital that doesn't need workers to generate value. That creates a paradox the market isn't prepared to solve. What happens when productivity grows but employment shrinks? When companies can scale infinitely with minimal staff? When profit no longer depends on payroll? Some economists argue that this transition could unleash a new wave of innovation, freeing humans from repetitive tasks. But history reminds us, efficiency doesn't always translate to equality. Without mechanisms to share the gains of automation, the benefits of AI may flow upward, concentrating power in the hands of those who own the machines, not those displaced by them. And so, as the world celebrates the age of artificial intelligence, a quiet question lingers beneath the applause. If capital can now grow without labor, what role is left for us? Because maybe AI isn't working with us anymore. Maybe it's learning how to work without us. Every major technological revolution promises progress, but progress, like profit, rarely distributes itself evenly. Artificial intelligence has become the newest and perhaps the most powerful engine of inequality the world has ever seen. The early data tells a clear story. According to the Center for Economic Policy Research, the United States could see its GDP rise by 5.4% from AI-driven productivity gains over the next decade. The Philippines, by comparison, may gain just 2.7%. On paper, both numbers look positive. In reality, they reveal the same pattern that has repeated for centuries. Those who already have capital, infrastructure, and data will multiply their advantage, while those who rely on labor will be left behind. Because in the AI era, growth no longer comes from the number of people you employ. It comes from the amount of data you control and the computing power you can afford. More than 70% of all AI-related profits are expected to flow into just two countries, the United States and China. Both dominate in three critical resources: data, capital, and chips. Data trains the algorithms, capital scales them, and chips keep them alive. This combination creates a loop of self-reinforcing dominance, what economists now call the data network effect. The logic is simple but devastating. The more users a country's AI system has, the more data it collects. The more data it collects, the smarter it becomes. The smarter it becomes, the more users it attracts. Eventually, one nation's technological lead turns into another's economic dependency. Meanwhile, in places like Manila, Dhaka, or Nairobi, workers like Mila are discovering that globalization's old promise has expired. For decades, they built livelihoods around outsourcing, the idea that Western demand for cheap labor would always create opportunity abroad. But as AI absorbs those jobs, the demand isn't shifting to another developing country. It's evaporating entirely. Here's a snapshot of the new reality. In Silicon Valley, a startup raises $500 million in venture capital to train its next-generation AI model. On the same day, halfway across the world, a business process outsourcing firm in Manila lays off 3,000 employees because its biggest client has automated their entire customer service department. Two economies, one technology, but completely opposite outcomes. AI is now doing to nations what automation once did to workers. It's dividing the world into those who own the technology and those who serve it. The divide isn't just about GDP, it's structural. The US and China control not only the data pipelines, but also the energy grids and semiconductor supply chains that power AI. These are the new oil fields of the 21st century, and most countries don't even have a stake in them. Without chips, energy, and infrastructure, developing nations can't compete in training models or hosting large-scale computation. They become consumers in a system they can no longer influence. For Evan, the young developer in Ohio, the transformation looks different but feels equally unsettling. His job still exists, but the labor market around him is tightening. As companies automate entry-level coding tasks, the demand for human developers drops while expectations rise. He finds himself competing against a global pool of talent and against AI tools that can write, test, and deploy code faster than any junior engineer. His wages stagnate, his workload grows. He hasn't been replaced, but he's been devalued. That's the quiet truth about AI's economic impact. It doesn't always destroy jobs. Sometimes it just erodes their worth. The gap between nations mirrors the gap between people. Those who own the tools move faster, earn more, and accumulate power. Those who use the tools merely keep up until they can't. AI is not just dividing skill sets, it's dividing the world itself. The last great wave of globalization connected economies through labor. This one disconnects them through automation. Nations that built prosperity on people now find themselves competing in a game where people no longer matter as much as data and machines. And so, as AI fuels growth in the world's richest economies, it quietly drains the opportunities that once sustained the poorest. The result is a new global order, one where innovation no longer lifts all boats, but raises only the yachts. In this new hierarchy of intelligence and capital, the world faces a defining question. If the future belongs to those who own the algorithms, what happens to those who were only ever part of the code? Every revolution begins with a promise. The Industrial Revolution promised abundance. The digital revolution promised freedom. And now, the AI revolution promises something even greater, a world where machines handle the work so humans can finally live better lives. But history, as it turns out, doesn't promise anything. It only repeats. Between 1980 and 2010, the United States and the United Kingdom went through their own version of automation shock. Factories that once roared with life fell silent. In America alone, over 7 million manufacturing jobs vanished, hollowing out entire regions that came to be known as the Rust Belt. Cities like Detroit, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh, once symbols of industrial strength, became cautionary tales of what happens when efficiency replaces people faster than progress can protect them. Back then, the narrative was almost identical. Automation was supposed to make industries more competitive, It did, but it also broke the backbone of the middle class, the very group that had powered consumer economies for decades. When machines became cheaper than men, entire towns became irrelevant. Unemployment soared, communities fractured. Opioid addiction rose where opportunity collapsed. The human cost of progress became invisible on balance sheets, but painfully visible everywhere else. Even earlier, in 1930, the economist John Maynard Keynes predicted this paradox.
In his essay, Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren, he imagined that by the 21st century, humanity's productivity would be so high that people would only need to work 15 hours a week. He called it technological unemployment, but he saw it as a temporary stage, a bridge toward leisure and well-being. Nearly a century later, productivity has indeed skyrocketed, but working hours haven't fallen. Instead, inequality has widened. The top 1% captured most of the gains, while wages for the average worker stagnated. The promise of working less and living more never arrived, because the rules of distribution never changed. And now, AI is accelerating that same cycle, only this time the stakes are far greater. Industrial machines once replaced muscle. AI replaces mind.
The assembly line may have displaced the factory worker, but the algorithm can now displace the analyst, the writer, even the engineer. The very people who once thought their knowledge would protect them are discovering that knowledge itself has been automated. This isn't just about economics, it's about the rhythm of human progress. Every major leap in productivity has widened inequality before society found a way to rebalance it. The steam engine concentrated power in factories. Automation concentrated it in corporations, and AI is concentrating it in algorithms owned by a handful of firms that control the data and the infrastructure behind them. The pattern is hauntingly familiar. First, technology amplifies productivity. Then, it displaces workers. Then, it rewards those who own the machines. The middle class shrinks, social unrest rises, and only afterward do we begin to rebuild. But this time, rebuilding might not be so simple. When machines replaced muscle, people could retrain, move, and find new industries to join. But when machines begin to replicate cognitive work, judgment, creativity, reasoning, the room for retraining narrows. What do you teach someone when the machine learns faster than they can? Economists and policymakers like to say that new technologies always create new jobs. And that's true, to a point. The problem is timing. The jobs of the future arrive slower than the jobs of the past disappear. In that gap, people lose not only income, but dignity, identity, and trust in the system itself. AI doesn't just threaten employment, it tests the social contract. Who benefits when machines do the thinking? Who decides how the gains are shared? The lesson from history is clear. Technology alone does not create progress. The rules that govern its rewards do. Keynes believed that productivity would free humans from toil. Instead, it freed capital from labor. Unless that equation changes, the next few decades could make the Industrial Revolution look merciful by comparison. Because this time, the test is not about how many jobs are replaced. It's about what kind of humanity remains when work is no longer the foundation of value. Once again, the exam paper is on the table. The question hasn't changed, but the stakes have. Last time, machines replaced our strength. This time, they're coming for our minds. If AI is cheaper, faster, and more accurate, why not replace the CEO first? That question isn't just rhetorical. It cuts straight into the heart of the economic paradox shaping our era. For years, executives and consultants have told workers that automation is inevitable, that efficiency always wins. But if efficiency is the universal rule, then the people at the very top, the decision makers, should be the first to go. And yet, they never are. In theory, AI could already do much of what senior executives claim as their unique domain. It can process more information than any human brain could handle, simulate multiple strategic outcomes, and calculate risk without bias or fatigue. Algorithms can evaluate market conditions, adjust prices in real time, and even recommend mergers or acquisitions based on predictive data models. A 2024 McKinsey study estimates that nearly 40% of a CEO's daily decisions are repetitive, rule-based, and technically automatable. Choosing where to allocate capital, when to cut costs, how to optimize workforce distribution, these are functions AI can already perform with remarkable precision. So why do the same executives who automate others' jobs remain untouchable? Because power, unlike labor, isn't subject to efficiency. The simple truth is that CEOs aren't just workers with fancy titles, they are the custodians of control. They decide what gets automated, whose work is replaced, and whose remains strategic. AI may optimize performance, but it doesn't question authority. It follows the commands of those who own it, and that ownership defines who stays relevant. This is where the CEO paradox becomes more than a quirk of business. It becomes a mirror of the system itself. Technology is often described as neutral, but its impact never is. A machine doesn't choose who benefits from its efficiency. Humans do. And the humans who make those choices are rarely the ones at risk of replacement. The hierarchy protects itself. Corporate structures, legal frameworks, and boards of directors exist precisely to insulate top management from the very market forces they unleash on everyone else. When layoffs happen, they're called cost optimization. When executive bonuses rise, it's called performance incentives. The same algorithm that determines which employees are expendable is never applied to those writing the code of the algorithm. Philosophers warned us about this long before the age of AI. Man created tools to free himself, the writer Henry Adams once noted, and became the tool of his tools. The pattern continues. We design machines to save time, then spend that saved time serving the machine's demands, checking dashboards, optimizing metrics, feeding data back into systems that now decide our worth. But here's the deeper irony. The very people championing AI as a replacement for human labor are the ones most afraid of being replaced by it. They promote automation in the name of productivity, yet insist that leadership, vision, and judgment remain inherently human. In other words, they argue that their own roles are irreplaceable. Not because they can't be automated, but because they define what counts as automation in the first place. It's the oldest privilege in capitalism, to make the rules and stand above them. Imagine for a moment if the same logic applied upward. What if a corporate AI could analyze years of executive decision-making, compare it against performance metrics, and determine whether a CEO actually adds value? What if shareholders used algorithms to benchmark leadership efficiency the same way companies benchmark employees? The results would likely be uncomfortable. Many high-paid executives would fail their own test. But that won't happen, not yet, because the people with the authority to install such systems are the ones who would be judged by them. And so we return to the paradox. The AI revolution isn't just automating work. It's revealing how deeply the global economy depends on inequality of accountability. Those who control capital don't need to fear efficiency because they define what efficiency means. This raises a moral question far beyond the walls of any boardroom. If our systems are designed to serve those who command them, not those who depend on them, where does that leave the rest of society? We've reached a point where technology can outthink, outwork, and outperform us, but it still can't outvote us. The direction AI takes next won't be determined by its intelligence, but by the intentions of those who wield it. And if history is any guide, those intentions rarely start with fairness. Because when the people who make the rules aren't bound by them, the rest of the world becomes the experiment.
If artificial intelligence can eventually do everything faster, cheaper, and smarter, then what exactly is left for us? For centuries, human value was tied to productivity. What we could do defined who we were. Farmers produced food, workers produced goods, professionals produced knowledge. But what happens when machines can produce all of it, food, goods, even ideas, without us? This isn't a question about jobs, it's a question about meaning. Perhaps the answer lies not in what AI can do, but in what it cannot. AI can replicate information, pattern, and process, but it still struggles with emotion, empathy, and purpose. It can imitate the rhythm of a human voice, but not the resonance of human connection. It can compose a song, but not understand why that song makes someone cry. If labor once measured our worth, then the post-labor world must measure something else, something distinctly human. The first step is to rethink education itself. The skills that built the industrial economy, compliance, repetition, specialization, are becoming obsolete. The future belongs to creativity, critical thinking, and human-machine collaboration. We must teach not just how to use AI, but how to think with it, to ask better questions, not just find faster answers. This shift isn't theoretical, it's already happening. Around the world, schools and universities are experimenting with new curricula that blend art, ethics, and analytics, preparing students not to compete with AI, but to complement it. In this new economy, the most valuable skill may not be coding or engineering, but the ability to connect ideas, stories, and people in ways that machines cannot replicate. But education alone won't be enough. The post-labor world also demands a new social contract. If automation replaces millions of jobs, then the wealth it generates must circulate back to the people who made that automation possible, not vanish upward into corporate balance sheets. Economists have proposed ideas once dismissed as utopian: a universal basic income to guarantee stability, a robot tax to fund retraining programs, data dividends that reward individuals for the information used to train AI models. These ideas challenge the assumption that productivity should only benefit shareholders. In a world where machines create value, society must redefine who deserves to share in it. Alongside these policies, new models of ownership are emerging, systems where communities, not corporations, co-own the algorithms that shape their lives. Cooperative AI, where workers collectively manage the tools that automate their industries, could restore agency in a world drifting toward digital feudalism. Some governments are exploring shorter work weeks, letting citizens share the gains of automation in time, not just income. Because the promise of technology was never to make a few people infinitely rich, it was to make life universally better. And yet, even with these reforms, there remains a deeper challenge, a spiritual one. For generations, people derived identity from work. When someone asked, "What do you do?" they were really asking, "Who are you?" But in a world where machines handle the doing, we'll have to rediscover the being. Mila, the former call center worker in Manila, finds herself back in the workforce, not answering phones, but managing AI systems that handle communication across languages. She doesn't speak to customers anymore. She trains the models that do. Evan, the young developer from Ohio, no longer writes code for corporations. He now advises companies on AI governance, helping them decide what machines should do and what they shouldn't. Both represent the same evolution: humans moving from execution to ethics, from doing the task to defining its purpose. Maybe that's the true direction of progress, not to eliminate work, but to elevate it, to move from survival to significance. Because when machines can do everything, the only thing left worth doing is what gives life meaning. Empathy, creativity, connection. AI may be the end of labor as we know it, but it could also be the beginning of humanity as we've forgotten it.
As one philosopher put it, man created tools to liberate himself and became their servant. Now he must learn, once again, to be free.
So perhaps, when machines have taken over our work, it won't be the end of our story. It'll be the start of a new one, where progress is no longer measured by productivity, but by purpose. Because maybe, after all this time spent teaching machines to act like humans, it's time for humans to remember how to be human again. Every era believes it's living through the end of something. The Industrial Revolution felt like the end of craftsmanship. The Internet felt like the end of privacy. And now, artificial intelligence feels like the end of work, and maybe the end of capitalism as we know it. But endings are rarely endings. More often, they're negotiations with the future. AI is not the death of the economy. It's the start of a new kind of contract between humans, machines, and meaning. The question is whether we'll be wise enough to rewrite it before it's written for us. Throughout this story, one truth has become clear. AI doesn't just create productivity, it reshapes who owns it. In the past, labor generated value. Workers exchanged time and skill for wages, and productivity gains were distributed, unevenly, but at least visibly, across society. Now, the equation has shifted. The value created by millions of human actions is being captured by the owners of algorithms trained on those actions. In this sense, AI hasn't broken capitalism, it's perfected it. It has distilled the logic of efficiency down to its purest, most ruthless form, capital that grows without labor. But that also means something profound. If the link between labor and value is gone, then so is the old foundation of capitalism itself. History reminds us that every technological revolution opens two roads. One leads to concentration of power, of data, of wealth in the hands of those who own the machines. The other leads to redistribution of opportunity, of knowledge, of agency, in ways that redefine progress for everyone. The choice between those roads is not technological, it's political, it's moral, it's human. We could let AI become the ultimate monopolist, a system where a handful of corporations control intelligence itself while billions compete for relevance. Or we could use this moment to rebuild a more balanced world, one where the benefits of automation are shared and the meaning of work evolves beyond survival. That means designing policies that don't just protect people from AI, but empower them through it. Tax systems that treat automation gains like income, not magic. Universal education that treats digital literacy as a human right. Governance frameworks that keep algorithms accountable to the societies they serve. And maybe most importantly, a redefinition of value itself, away from what we produce and toward what we create. Because if capitalism once relied on labor to produce worth, and labor is no longer required, then perhaps human value must come from something else entirely, the meaning we bring into the world. Mila, who once answered phones in Manila, now teaches empathy training for customer-facing AI systems. Evan, the coder from Ohio, designs frameworks to make machine decisions transparent and fair. They are no longer competing with machines, they are guiding them. That's not the end of work, it's the evolution of purpose. Maybe the post-capitalist world won't be defined by GDP or market share, but by something harder to measure: dignity, creativity, connection. Because when machines can do everything except care, that becomes our greatest advantage. If capitalism once needed labor to create value, but now no longer does, then perhaps it's time to ask, what makes us valuable has never been our productivity. It's our capacity for meaning. AI might not be the end of the world, but it will be the end of the world as we know it, and that's not necessarily bad if we choose to evolve with it. So, as we stand on the edge of this transformation, one question remains, the question that will decide what kind of future we inherit. Will we make AI serve humanity? Or will we let humanity serve AI? The answer begins with what and who we choose to value next.